Running campaigns is great. That's why I'm so pleased with what's happening here, is because I actually have a team of people where one person can say to them, this is what I'm looking for. They might already have a solution, but they're customizing some of my solutions.
Michael Morris, good morning. Thank you so much for joining me to talk about your digital marketing agency, Morris Media. You've been working with Vibe for a few months now, and we're going to talk about what you've learned, what you've seen, what you like, what you're excited about. But first, maybe you could give us a little introduction about who you are, what you're all about, maybe some challenges in the business landscape that have led you to CTV.
Sure. So again, I'm Michael Morris of Morris Media. My background when I started, so I graduated college in 1998, and I always wanted to be in radio. And what happened is I got into radio, but I didn't want to sell it. I wanted to be on the air. So after being in radio at 32, I started my own agency because what bothered me the most was, you've probably seen this, where they'd always put, we'll do a full ROI on your campaign.
Mhm.
And I did that for 12 years or whatever it was. And I remember asking my boss, we never do this part. And he said, just sell spots, man. And I thought, I already felt bad about this because I don't know if it really works.
Yeah.
And now you don't know that this works. So when I left that, my goal was to be the person that finds out how this really works.
Mhm.
So everything that I do is not based on someone's budget. It is based on what their net revenue is. If I'm doing my task properly, all we're talking about is show me your web numbers, show me your P&L, all that kind of stuff. I only concentrate on the numbers.
Mhm. So, given that framework, um, I think I understood that you had experimented with some CTV platforms in the past,
Yes.
and that may not have given you the results you were looking for, and then you came over to us. So I'm setting you up a little bit, but I would love to hear what that was like.
When COVID hit,
Mhm.
it changed my outlook on how all this worked, because at that time period, I think what happened was buying television became this thing where it's so expensive for what you're getting, and there's really no negotiating, right? But it goes back to what I was saying about numbers. We can never prove an ROI to anybody, because unless you control all facets, so as an agency, you control their radio, their billboard, their TV, all that.
Mhm.
What we could never do is prove what this really means. You couldn't really show growth month over month.
Mhm.
However, if you use streaming, so I've got a streaming campaign that if you looked at a 2 month period, their traffic is up 70% total. Okay. So it was like 45, and this month is 25%, and the month's not even over. Targeting just people who are looking for that specific thing. No radio, no billboard, no nothing.
Oh, okay.
So, so as an experiment, I did another campaign where I ran 400,000 impressions, but on streaming. But then I added in another 6.2 million in radio. The numbers are off the charts when you're looking at website traffic, new visitors, all of that. You can directly correlate how many times this is running and to who or whom. And you can look at those numbers and say, out of that, if I got 1% of those people to come in, so let's just take the electric company I was talking about.
Mhm.
If 270 people go to your website and I only capture 1% of those people, but the average job is $3,000, I can make you money off 1%.
Yeah.
What happens if it's 5% or 8%? You don't have to win 100% of the time when you're doing this.
Yeah.
You have to beat the average. So if you look at, I'll give you a number for the jewelry store I was talking about, where I
Yeah.
combined the 6.2 and the 400,000 impressions. In Columbus, Ohio, so I'm a big research person. There were 11,453 marriages last year. The number will pretty much be the same because there's only so many weekends you could book an event and a hall and caterers and all that other stuff, right? So let's just say there's 11,000 people. If my store does that I represent does 100 rings a month, that's 1,200, which means I'm in the 8% of total rings sold anyway.
Mm-hmm.
To really win, I only have to get another 1 or 2%. See what I mean? So if I get to 15% of all rings sold here, it's only a 4 or 5% swing. That's what we just did in April. And we still have our campaign in May to go.
Wow.
And then we have Mother's Day in between. So you could take an investment of $10,000 or $15,000 if you know how much they make. So the average ring they're making $2,500.
Mm-hmm.
If I sell 20 rings in a month, it's 50 grand, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's more than a 3-time return. That's what I mean by doing the math and actually figuring out running campaigns is great. And that's why I'm so pleased with what's happening here, is because I think with having Rachel and Jamal and Emma, I actually have a team of people where one person can say to them, this is what I'm looking for. They might they might already have a solution, but they're customizing some of my solutions.
Yeah. So how could you tell me a little bit more about, obviously you were saying you have the dream team, Rachel, Jamal, and Emma. But I know you're in the weeds too, right there with them. So could you tell me a little bit more about what that's been like for you in the platform, like optimizations that you found to be really impactful, best practices, any feedback on the platform itself and what building a campaign is like for you would be super helpful.
So I'll give you the example when I first started doing this. I can literally pick up the phone and text Rachel, or I can call Jamal and say, I called Jamal with something and I said, I don't know if you guys can help. I've got this client that the demo is probably 5 to 7% of the entire market. And I have to do this in Columbus, Akron, and Dayton.
Mhm.
And he goes, no problem. We'll build you a custom audience. So you guys did the work
Yeah.
to help me.
Yeah.
Other platforms are plug and play. So I can't create the demo because I don't really know where to find that information.
Mhm.
What I think improved my results here is me reaching out. You guys always provide something and say, this may not be the thing, but here's what we found.
Yeah.
Doing research on my own and bringing it to the table. So we're working together on this. It never feels um, like I'm buying widgets. I couldn't pay enough for that kind of service.
That's wonderful to hear. And I mean, I think one of the reasons that that's how we operate, and again, I mean, you're dealing with some of the best over here, but is that CTV is changing all the time, and the capabilities and first party data, third party data that we're using for targeting is evolving all the time. And so if we are not responsive, then that means we're not keeping up. You may be an expert in CTV, in 2023. Well, guess what? It looks totally different today. So
Right.
that's why our model has to be that way because there's optimizations you can do today you couldn't do yesterday.
I
Um,
do feel that that's a huge difference. I didn't mean to cut you off.
no,
I
no,
feel
go
like
ahead.
that's a huge difference from when the first time I did it to now. Is in the beginning it felt like a tool,
Yeah.
right? It's just a hammer.
Mhm.
If you don't know how to use it properly, it's not doing anything. What I feel is this is a living, breathing thing because when I'm looking at it, the zip codes are changing, like deliveries changing day by day. The demo is still being hit. What I'm amazed at is it feels like this thing is growing without like almost in an organic way, the way it should.
Yeah.
And when you look at the data and then you go to somebody's website traffic, you can pair this up. If you communicate to the right people in the right demo, in the right zips, this will work. I can guarantee results based on I know what your profit margin is per item, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
If we just do this, we win. This is giving me that platform to literally over deliver while I'm over delivering rate.
Right. So well, you've mentioned numbers and you've mentioned some KPIs, but I'm just curious when you were going in, and sometimes this changes for people. They'll say, I came in just looking for a low CPM. And then, by the second or third campaign, I was really focused on web visits or ROAS. Did you have some of those KPIs that you were really, really focused on? And then what have been some of the results that you've seen around those KPIs?
Here's the way my biggest thing is if you do this right, if you're doing a campaign right, the first thing they're going to do is the consumer is going to check you out.
Hmm.
So what I always tell people is when you look at whenever we start a campaign, before it starts, take a snapshot of what it would. And most of these things look like the movie Flatliners, like it's just this. You might be too young for that movie, but well, they remade it, so there you go. But it just looks like this. When a campaign starts, it should look like you're having a heart attack, right?
Right.
Big rise and run, rise and run, and rise and run. If you do that campaign for 90 days, you'll see this rise and run, and then it starts to slow down where it's peaking, but it's not dropping all the way. By month 2, it starts to flatten out. And by month 3, it just continues to grow like, what was that? The Price is Right, where the guy on the mountain, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But when they stop, it completely drops down. So I had somebody do that a couple of months ago. So we did a campaign in December, and they did $60,000 in gift cards for a tattoo place.
Okay.
Just gift cards. That's no ink work,
Oh,
piercings, nothing.
wow.
And he stopped because he got what he wanted, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I got my money. So let's say I made 80 grand or something. I got my money.
Yeah.
Why am I going to reinvest it? So I didn't tell him to keep going.
And
Because
then what happened?
yeah. And the rest of the story is it tanked. Within 5 weeks, he said, something's wrong. I know it is. And he said, well, what did you do? It's not what I did. You stopped feeding the fire. Once we plugged it back in, it went back up.
Oh, wow.
Right? So the best thing you can do is if you can get someone to give you 60 days, continuous days, now you can measure that traffic. Because there's, again, you can measure traffic first and then net results.
Listen, I have 1 minute left on my recording life, so
Oh, sorry.
no. Thank you so much
This
for.
is your fault because you just let me ramble. That's not my problem.
No, I wanted to hear about your genuine experience, and that's what we got. And thank goodness for me, it was incredibly positive. So I super, super appreciate it.